Little update on the Microtan 65 cards. So when I got the cards, one of the processor cards, the Microtan 65 card itself, wasn't working. I plugged it into the little monitor I've got here. Nothing, it was blank. And I put the scope on the video signal, and it turned out that the sync pulses were just too far apart. And that is generated by the clock oscillator circuit, which is a 6 meg clock oscillator circuit. After swapping components and checking the board and measuring other components and trying to work out what was going on, it turned out to be the 100 picofarad capacitor in the oscillator circuit, which was just erratic, and the frequency was alternating between 6 meg and 3 meg, and it was just terrible. So I fixed that. Still didn't work. And I found that one of the ICs that should have been a 74LS139 was a 74LS193, which didn't work very well. So I swapped that out, and it now works. So if I turn that on, we've got the display there. There's no keyboard on this at the moment, so I just reset it on the backplane there, and you can see it's come up and it says Tambug there. So that's working. There was also a Tanex card which had been labelled as not working, and I've got that working. That turned out to be a solder short on the back of the PCB. There was a solder bridge which had shorted two signals out. I didn't bother finding out what they were, I just took the short away. The soldering on those four boards, the two processors and the two Tanex boards I got, are okay, they're acceptable. I also got a PGM card, and the soldering on that was terrible. But as I've bought a recreation high resolution graphics card, I don't think I'll bother with the PGM card. That will just sit there. I might try it out, but you have to put ribbon cables over to the Microtan 65 with that, so I don't really fancy doing that. So at the moment I've got a Micron working over there, and I've also got here in a rack Microtan 65 and a Tanex card with a full motherboard in a it is a 19-inch rack actually. It's a 4U high though, and it's difficult getting hold of 4U high, and I did manage to get a 4U rack, which means the side plates are high enough, because the Microtan cards are slightly larger than a Euro card size. And if you drill some holes in the side, then you can actually get it to fit in this rack. It's quite a nice little rack. It's aluminium. It's fairly cheap. It wasn't free by any means, and it does fit. You have to space the runners a little bit. I did that with some M3 washers, and everything fits in there. So if I turn it on, I've got an ATX power supply on the side. If I turn that on, Tambug appears on the monitor, and I've got the full alphanumeric keyboard here. I can reset it, and I can also list memory and so on, and that's now running off the Tanex. One thing that did confuse me was that I couldn't get it working in the motherboard. The first problem I had was I thought maybe plus or minus 12 volts was needed, but I don't think it is. But I wired it up anyway from the ATX power supply, and that blew up two tantalum capacitors which went short circuit, so I snipped those out. The other thing was that the links on the Microtan 65 card, you have to have no links and a Tanex card, or you can't run with this motherboard for some reason. I think some of these signals, IOE, RAM-E maybe and ROM-E, must be driven by the motherboard, something like that. But anyway, you can't run the Microtan 65 with those links set in a full motherboard, not the one that I've got. Anyway, there is some circuitry on this one, some chips on the side. I'm not sure what they're doing. I think they're probably buffering signals or something. So I think the problem I had there was that in a full motherboard system like this, you've got to have a Tanex. You can't run with just a Microtan 65 on its own, which you can do in the Micron. Over there in the 2-slot motherboard, you can do that. You can run with or without a Tanex. But it sort of makes sense, isn't it? You wouldn't really want to run in a rack system like this with was it 12 slots or something, and just have a Microtan 65. That would be a little bit silly. So at the moment I've only got one slot free, but I'll probably build up the high resolution graphics card and put that in there, and that'll be the big system, and then the Micron will be a smaller one. I do have another processor card, which is a recreation of modern Microtan 65, so I'll build that up, but I haven't got enough motherboards for that now, so I might build another system, maybe a Micron system with a modern Tan-X, so probably end up with 3 of these things. But yeah, so we'll see how we get on. Next stage I think will be to look at some sort of storage. I've got an Arduino attached here which is reading the cassette output, and that's going fairly well, but I don't really want to put a TANDOS card in here because I'm going to then have to use some sort of floppy or floppy emulator, and I think some of the chips might be a bit difficult to get hold of on the TANDOS. You can get a recreation TANDOS card, so maybe I'd do that if I built another rack system up with the modern components, the modern Microtan. But at the moment I'm using the FX502P software, slightly modified, to read cassette output. So this is an Arduino just directly attached to the cassette output, the TTL, not the signals that actually go to a cassette deck if you had one. So this is reading TTL signals directly, which is a lot easier than having to have amplifiers and things to read the cassette stuff, which is what I did on the 502. So at the moment I can read the data, I just haven't managed to send it back. So the Arduino will be able to store stuff, and what I did with the 502 was put an SD card on it, so this would become an SD card version of the cassette interface. So the only disadvantage to that is it will be as slow as a cassette interface because you've got to play the data. Should be a bit more reliable though, and you'll be able to get data to and from a computer as well, which will be useful.